Donald Trump mocks Jasmine Crockett's career with the kind of sneer that drips arrogance. It isn't subtle. It isn't clever. It's the same brand of mockery he's used for years, dismissive, loud, meant to belittle rather than debate. And on this night, in front of a charged audience, he aims it straight at Crockett's legal background. Some lawyer, he scoffs, waving a hand with the dismissiveness of a man who believes ridicule is more powerful than reason. A nobody, attorney who never did anything important, now pretending to be some great voice for justice. The words echo across the room like a slap. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Cameras swivel, desperate to capture Crockett's reaction. A handful of Trump supporters snicker, their laughter sharp and cruel. But the majority of the room falls into a tense hush, the kind of silence that carries weight. Every eye turns to Crockett. For a split second, she says nothing. The insult hangs there, thick and heavy, filling the space between them. Her stillness is electric. Her composure feels almost dangerous, as if the quiet itself is a weapon Trump never anticipated. Trump leans back, smirking. He believes he's landed the blow, that the room belongs to him. It's the performance he's perfected for decades: mock, dominate, sneer, move on. But tonight feels different. Tonight the air doesn't bend in his direction. Tonight the audience seems to be waiting, holding its breath as if sensing a storm about to break. And Crockett? She simply watches him, her gaze steady, unflinching. The tension sharpens with every heartbeat. A flicker of defiance dances in her eyes. The crowd knows. Viewers at home know. Something is coming. It's the kind of moment that will not just end an exchange, it will redefine it. Donald Trump has mocked plenty of people before. Many have stumbled, some have folded, most have faded into the background. But Jasmine Crockett is not built to fade. She carries herself with the resilience of someone who has been dismissed before, underestimated before, and who has always found a way to turn doubt into fuel. And in the silence that follows Trump's insult, America leans forward, waiting, because what Crockett does next will leave the entire nation stunned. Trump's insult wasn't just another jab tossed into the chaos of political theater. It carried the weight of a pattern, a signature move that has defined his rise and dominated his stagecraft. For years, he has wielded mockery like a blunt weapon, reducing opponents not through reasoned argument, but by stripping them of dignity with a smirk and a line designed for headlines. He mocks physical appearances, family backgrounds, careers, and accents. And now, standing before Jasmine Crockett, he chose her legal career, the very foundation of her identity as a fighter for justice, as his target. Why does it matter? Because this wasn't a casual sneer. This was Donald Trump, a man facing more indictments and lawsuits than any modern political figure, mocking a black woman whose entire professional life was built on upholding the law. It was arrogance layered on irony, swagger masking insecurity, insult pretending to be dominance. And in that moment, the power imbalance seemed obvious. Trump, with decades of media saturation, millions of followers, and the aura of a former president, towering with bravado. Crockett, younger, newer to the national stage, a woman of color in a space still dominated by men who underestimate her. He believed he could flatten her with words. But that underdog framing, that assumption that she would shrink back, flustered, embarrassed, is exactly what makes the moment so pivotal. Because Crockett didn't represent just herself. She carried the weight of countless others who have been written off, laughed at, or dismissed. Every immigrant hustling to prove their worth. Every woman in a male-dominated arena. Every professional whose achievements are overlooked until they fight twice as hard. That's why the room went silent. That's why America leaned closer. It wasn't just about the insult. It was about whether dignity could survive in the face of arrogance, whether truth could withstand ridicule. The stakes weren't political theater, they were cultural. This wasn't a fight about policy papers or committee votes. It was about respect. It was about who gets to define worth in America. Does power come from loudness or from perseverance? From mocking others or from standing firm in your own story? And as the camera zoomed in on Crockett, the question sharpened. Could she, with calm resolve, turn Trump's insult into a mirror that exposed him instead? Could she stand for more than herself, stand as proof that being underestimated is not a weakness, but a strength waiting to be revealed? Viewers watching knew instinctively. Something bigger was unfolding. This wasn't just about one insult. It was about a clash of values that would ripple across America. But to understand why Trump chose to mock her career, we need to look deeper into his own contradictions. Donald Trump's rise has always been built on spectacle. For decades, he has treated politics the way he treated business and reality television. More about dominance, less about substance. He thrives on turning people into caricatures, cutting them down with nicknames and insults that echo louder than any policy position. For his base, it's entertainment. For his opponents, it's humiliation. And for Trump himself, it's a performance of power. From the earliest days of his political career, Trump established a pattern. He mocked Senator John McCain's war record, sneering at the sacrifice of a man who spent years as a prisoner of war. He dismissed women with casual cruelty, from labeling journalists as nasty to reducing professional women to their looks. He invented names: Crooked Hillary, Sleepy Joe, Little Marco, designed to stick like glue. He derided immigrants as criminals, entire professions as useless, and anyone who dared to challenge him as losers. It wasn't wit. It wasn't satire. It was blunt force ridicule, delivered not to debate ideas but to strip human beings of their legitimacy. And yet the contradictions always loomed. Even as he mocked others for their careers, Trump himself was embroiled in failure after failure: bankrupt casinos, shuttered airlines, a university sued for fraud. Even as he mocked professionals for not being good enough, he surrounded himself with lawyers who later testified against him, advisors who turned on him, and cabinet members who described him as reckless behind closed doors. The irony sharpened as his legal troubles mounted. Facing indictments for election interference, hush money payments, and classified documents, Trump still managed to stand before crowds and mock the career of Jasmine Crockett, a woman whose very profession embodied the law he so often bent or broke. And that's the duality that made him larger than life. To his supporters, these contradictions didn't matter. They saw the bravado, the refusal to apologize, the image of a man who says it like it is. To his critics, the arrogance was staggering. A man on trial in multiple courts, dismissing the legitimacy of a black woman attorney as if her years of hard work meant nothing. This is Trump's essence as a political villain. He projects confidence so loudly it drowns out scrutiny. He reframes weakness as strength, turning scandal into theater. He is flawed, deeply and obviously, but his ability to dominate a room through sheer spectacle has given him an aura of invincibility. His insults don't just sting, they stick, echoing in headlines, forcing opponents to respond on his terms. But there's another layer: the way he particularly targets women and minorities who rise in spaces he believes belong to him. He mocked women journalists as emotional, women politicians as incompetent, and women lawyers as irrelevant. He treated professional credentials as meaningless, unless they served him, while simultaneously demanding respect for his own hollowed resume of business failures and reality TV fame. So when Trump turned to Jasmine Crockett and sneered at her career, it was not new. It was a continuation of the persona he has cultivated for decades, the showman who thrives on dismissing others to inflate himself. Only this time, the stage was different. The timing was different, and the opponent was different, because Crockett was not simply another political rival. She was not an untested newcomer fumbling for words. She was an attorney who had built her career on standing toe-to-toe with men who underestimated her, in courtrooms where credibility mattered more than bravado. She was a politician forged in the fires of being counted out, a voice sharpened by years of being told she didn't belong. Trump thought he had seen this play before. He thought the insult would land, the crowd would laugh, and the cameras would move on. But in reality, he was setting the stage for something else entirely. Because little did he know, Crockett's own story would make her the last person to underestimate. Jasmine Crockett's story doesn't begin in the halls of Congress or under the glare of television cameras. It begins in the quiet grit of a childhood where nothing was handed to her. She grew up in a world where opportunity wasn't guaranteed, where every success had to be fought for, where each achievement was the product of long nights, relentless effort, and the kind of determination that only comes from knowing what it feels like to be overlooked. Her parents instilled in her the values of persistence and self-respect. They weren't people of vast wealth or privilege, but they gave her something greater, a belief that her voice mattered even if others tried to silence it. That belief carried her through schools where she was often underestimated, through communities where young black women weren't expected to rise into positions of power. When she decided to study law, it wasn't out of ambition for titles or prestige. It was out of a raw desire for justice. She had seen too many people dismissed, too many voices ignored, too many lives bent under the weight of a system that seemed designed to favor the powerful. Law, to her, was more than books and arguments. It was a weapon for the underdog, a shield for the voiceless. Law school tested her resolve, but every test became a sharpening stone. She worked her way through it, often surrounded by peers who came from more privileged backgrounds, who assumed the road would be easier for them. Crockett knew different. She knew that every class she passed, every exam she conquered, was one more step in a fight she had been born into. As an attorney, she didn't chase the cushy corporate ladder. She chose cases that put her face to face with injustice. Criminal defense, civil rights, the people society too often wrote off. She stood beside clients who couldn't afford the kind of lawyers Trump so casually hired and discarded. She learned to fight in courtrooms where her words had to slice through bias and indifference. She learned the art of staying calm while others tried to rattle her. She learned the power of composure, the weight of facts, the strength of conviction. Her legal career wasn't about money. It was about mission. Each case, each client, each fight built a reservoir of resilience inside her. She knew what it meant to stare down arrogance in a courtroom and win not by being louder, but by being sharper. Politics was never part of some lifelong master plan. It was a calling that grew out of the same fire that pushed her into law. She saw the gap between communities like hers and the halls of power. She saw how policy shaped lives in ways most politicians never understood. Running for office wasn't about ego. It was about service, about stepping into arenas where people like her were often told they didn't belong, and she won. Not because it was easy, but because people recognized something real in her. They saw a fighter who had walked the hard road herself, who understood struggle not as a headline, but as a lived reality. All of that. The childhood, the classrooms, the courtrooms, the campaigns, prepared her for this exact moment with Trump. Because what is politics, if not another courtroom where perception is on trial? What is a televised showdown, if not a test of who can stay composed when arrogance tries to drown out truth? Trump saw only an opponent to mock, but Crockett carried with her every lesson of her journey. That silence can be stronger than shouting. That dignity can cut sharper than insult, and that the underestimated often hold the fiercest power. So when Trump thought he could tear her down with one insult, he had no idea that she was about to flip the script. The room was already thick with tension, but Trump wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his voice carrying that familiar mix of arrogance and mockery, the kind he's perfected over decades. "You call yourself a lawyer?" he jeered, shaking, his head with exaggerated disbelief. "If you were any good, maybe you'd have done something that mattered. Maybe you'd be remembered for something. But instead, here you are, another failed attorney trying to play politician." A ripple of uneasy laughter broke out from his supporters in the crowd, sharp and cutting, like glass against skin. The sound echoed across the room, emboldening Trump. He smirked wider, reveling in the moment, the way he always does when he believes he has turned a rival into a punchline. But not everyone was laughing. On the other side of the room, faces stiffened, eyes narrowed. The insult wasn't clever, it was cruel. It wasn't debate, it was dismissal. And the silence from those who didn't laugh spoke louder than the chuckles from those who did. Crockett didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in front of her, her gaze locked on Trump. Not anger, not fear, just unwavering composure. It was the kind of calm that unsettles a bully, the kind of silence that suggests strength rather than weakness. The cameras zoomed in, the nation watching every flicker of her expression. Trump's words lingered in the air, but she didn't rush to fill the space. She let the insult hang there, let it echo, let the weight of his arrogance press down until the audience could feel the imbalance. Trump, sensing the stillness but mistaking it for hesitation, pressed again. I mean, really, folks, has anyone even heard of her before? What cases has she won? What great legacy has she left? She's nothing more than a second-rate attorney who stumbled her way into Congress. He chuckled at his own line, certain he had landed another blow, but the room didn't erupt with the thunderous applause he expected. Instead, the tension deepened. The air grew tight, brittle, as though everyone present understood they were seconds away from witnessing something that would not be forgotten. Close-ups of Crockett showed the faintest flicker of a smile tugging at her lips. Not a grin of amusement, something quieter, sharper, a smile that signaled she was ready. Her silence became its own statement. It was the silence of someone who had been underestimated 1,000 times before and knew that her power came not from rushing, but from choosing the exact moment to strike. The crowd shifted uneasily. Even those who had laughed began to sense that the game was changing. Something about her stillness carried weight, the kind of presence that pulls attention, like gravity. Trump leaned back, clearly pleased with himself, convinced he had boxed her in. He had delivered his punchline, he had gotten his laugh, and now he was waiting to see Crockett squirm. But instead, she simply sat there, eyes locked on him with an intensity that made even his smirk falter for a beat. The cameras captured every second, the sweat glistening under the lights, the tension in the air, the hush that had fallen over the room. It was no longer just an exchange, it was theater. It was a test of composure, of who could outlast the silence, of who could turn the pause into power. And then, just when it seemed the moment might stretch forever, Crockett moved. She straightened in her chair, her hands still steady, her eyes unblinking. The faint smile remained, but now it carried intent. The kind of intent that signals the end of waiting and the beginning of something unforgettable. And then, with a calm but devastating precision, she unleashed the words that would change the entire room. For a few seconds, the room held its breath. Trump's mockery had hung in the air like smoke after an explosion, cruel, dismissive, calculated. Laughter rolled through his supporters, their eyes glinting with the satisfaction of a man who had once again turned politics into a circus. Cameras zoomed in on Crockett. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile nervously. She didn't shrink back. She simply inhaled, slowly, calmly. And then, with a voice measured and steady, Jasmine Crockett began her counterattack. "Mr. Trump," she began, her tone almost gentle, as if addressing a misbehaving child. "I didn't come here for entertainment. I came here for truth." The laughter in the crowd faltered. A few heads tilted. Her words didn't rise in pitch, but they cut through the noise like glass on stone. She paused, eyes locked on Trump, refusing to look away. Cameras captured the split screen, Trump smirking with arms folded, and Crockett unshaken, her posture upright, her eyes unblinking. "You mock me for being a lawyer," she continued. "But let's be clear. While I was standing in courtrooms defending people's rights, you were standing in courtrooms defending yourself against fraud." The audience gasped. A ripple of murmurs surged across the hall. Even those predisposed to laugh with Trump couldn't help but lean in. Trump's smirk twitched. "And while I studied the law to protect working families," Crockett pressed on, her voice sharpening, "you studied loopholes to avoid paying taxes. While I worked for justice, you worked the system for your own power." Gasps again, louder this time. A few claps. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. "You call me just a lawyer?" "That's right, I am a lawyer. And in case you've forgotten, lawyers know how to build a case. Right here, right now, and the case against you, Mr. Trump, writes itself." The crowd erupted, half applause, half shock. Trump raised a hand as if to wave it off, but the camera zoomed in on his face. His eyes flickered. The confidence wasn't quite so solid anymore. Crockett didn't rush. She let the room's energy build, then struck again. "You've mocked women your entire career. You've dismissed professionals, minorities, and anyone who didn't serve your ego. But let me tell you something. The strength of this country has never been in arrogance. It's in resilience. It's in people who work harder than the world expects them to, who keep showing up no matter how many times they're underestimated. A standing ovation began to ripple through the back rows. Trump shifted in his chair. The cameras caught it. A small but telling movement. "And let me make this personal," Crockett said, her voice dropping lower, each syllable deliberate. "I am the daughter of people who taught me that dignity matters more than insults. I am the product of communities who never had the luxury of sneering at others because survival required unity. And I am a woman who earned her place not by tearing people down, but by lifting others up." The crowd hushed. Silence, heavy and reverent, filled the room. Then, in a tone both calm and searing, she added, "So if you think you can reduce me to a punchline, you're not just mocking me, you're mocking every American who has ever had to fight twice as hard to be heard once." The silence broke into thunderous applause. Shouts of, "That's right!" rang from the audience. Crockett straightened her posture, her eyes locked once again on Trump. The camera caught it. His smirk gone, his jaw set, his face flushed under the bright lights. "You want to know what's funny, Mr. Trump?" she asked, her voice soft but deadly. "The thing you tried to use to humiliate me, my career, my work, my service, that's the very thing that makes me stronger than you'll ever be." The hall exploded. Applause, cheers, gasps, people on their feet, clapping, recording with their phones. Trump opened his mouth, but no words came. For the first time in that confrontation, silence wrapped around him. Crockett didn't wait. She delivered the final blow, her words crisp as a gavel striking wood. "And when history writes about this night, it won't remember your insult. It'll remember that you underestimated the wrong woman." She stepped back. She didn't smile. She didn't bow. She simply let the weight of her words hang in the air, untouchable. The audience roared. Applause thundered. Even those who had laughed at Trump's jab moments earlier found themselves nodding. And there it was, the shift. The moment she turned from underdog to victor, from target to truth-teller. Trump's face was still on the screen, his lips pursed, his brow furrowed. The cameras cut back and forth. The roaring crowd, Crockett standing firm, Trump rattled. Commentators would later say, "That was it. That was the moment she won." It wasn't loudness that defeated him. It wasn't mockery. It was dignity, sharpened into a weapon. But the true shockwaves weren't just in that room. They exploded across the nation. The moment Crockett's words hit the internet, they would ignite conversations in households, classrooms, and workplaces across America. And what happened next would prove that this clash wasn't just about one insult. It was about power, respect, and the future of a nation. The moment Jasmine Crockett's clapback landed, the room wasn't the only place that shook. Within minutes, the confrontation had jumped from that chamber to millions of screens across the country. Phones lit up with notifications, hashtags, were born in real time. And by the time Crockett left the podium, she wasn't just a congresswoman. She was a trending phenomenon. On Twitter, the hashtag #ATTACK Crockett clapback surged like wildfire. Within an hour, it cracked the top 5 worldwide. Trends. Clips of the moment were uploaded, reposted, and remixed, from straightforward newsreels to TikToks set to dramatic music, to memes comparing Trump's stunned silence to movie villains caught off guard. One viral tweet read, "Trump thought he was the hammer. Turns out Crockett was the anvil." Another simply captioned the clip, "When the lawyer checks the client." YouTube compilations popped up overnight with titles like, "The Moment Crockett Changed the Game," and "Trump Finally Meets His Match." Even late-night talk shows couldn't resist. Monologues replayed the exchange with comedic flair, but the punchline was always the same. Trump, the self-proclaimed master of the insult, had finally been outdone. But it wasn't just the comedy. Crowd weighing in. Legal experts broke down her response point by point, praising not only the delivery, but the airtight logic behind it. This wasn't just political theater, one analyst remarked on CNN. It was a demonstration of legal expertise and composure under pressure. Crockett didn't just defend herself, she redefined the moment. Celebrities joined the chorus. Actors, athletes, and musicians flooded Instagram with their takes. Some applauded her courage, others highlighted the symbolism of a black woman. attorney dismantling one of the most powerful men in America with nothing more than her words. One particularly viral Instagram reel featured her line played over the beat of a rap anthem, gaining millions of views in less than 24 hours. Meanwhile, Trump's reaction, or lack of one, became its own symbol. For a man known for quick retorts and dominance in verbal sparring, his silence was deafening. Commentators described it as the loudest quiet moment in politics this year. A meme captured the sentiment perfectly. A freeze frame of Trump's face mid-shock with the caption, "System error, no comeback found." In political circles, the debate spiraled into deeper analysis. Was this a turning point? Could this one exchange mark a shift in how women of color in politics are perceived and treated? Editorials from major outlets painted it as more than a clapback. They called it a cultural reset. For years, Trump has leaned on mockery as a weapon, wrote one columnist. Crockett didn't just deflect it, she dismantled it and turned it back on him. But beyond the noise, there was something subtler happening. For many ordinary viewers, Crockett's words carried a sense of validation. Teachers, lawyers, young women in law school, all saw themselves in her poise and strength. A law student from Chicago posted, "This is why I'm pushing through my exams. Representation matters." Another comment read, "I've waited years to see someone talk back with dignity and facts. Crockett gave us that." In living rooms, group chats, and community centers, people weren't just laughing at Trump's loss. They were inspired by Crockett's win. Her story resonated on a deeper level. The underdog attorney who had spent her life fighting for justice, finally having her moment on the biggest stage imaginable. Yet the viral frenzy was only the surface. Beneath the memes and headlines, a moral lesson began to crystallize. The confrontation wasn't about scoring points or humiliating an opponent. It was about the power of dignity in the face of arrogance. And in that contrast, millions found a reminder of what true leadership should look like. But beyond the memes and headlines, something deeper emerged, a moral lesson America couldn't ignore. In the quiet after the storm, as the cameras replayed the moment on loop and millions rewatched her words, Jasmine Crockett herself was the first to remind people. This wasn't about her. This wasn't even about Donald Trump. It was about what we value as a nation. Too often, politics feels like theater. Insults, jeers, sound bites crafted to humiliate. But Crockett turned the stage into a classroom, showing that substance, service, and integrity can outshine mockery every single time. She reframed the confrontation not as a victory over a man, but as a victory for values that have too often been forgotten. Her legal career had taught her something essential, that real strength lies not in loudness, but in clarity, not in tearing people down, but in standing up for something bigger than yourself. She told reporters afterward, "This was never about me being insulted. It's about whether we, as a people, choose truth over spectacle, justice over bullying, and service over ego." And those words resonated, far beyond Washington. They struck a chord with anyone who's ever been underestimated, anyone who's ever been mocked for their work, their background, or their dreams. Because Jasmine Crockett showed that you don't have to match arrogance with arrogance. You can dismantle it with dignity. The lesson was universal, that courage isn't the absence of attack, but the refusal to bow under it. That real leadership isn't in winning applause, but in holding your ground when it matters most. That insults may spark a laugh, but integrity sparks a legacy. Commentators said it plainly. In that instant, Crockett wasn't just defending her career. She was defending every underdog who had ever been told they didn't belong. She became a mirror for America's better angels, reminding us that resilience is louder than ridicule. The crescendo of her moment carried the weight of something timeless. Because while politics will move on, while new headlines will replace old ones, the moral heartbeat of what she displayed cannot be erased. And that's why her exchange with Trump became more than a viral clip. It became a parable, a story parents told their kids, a reference point in classrooms, a reminder whispered to anyone facing adversity, that sometimes the sharpest weapon you can wield is your own unshakable dignity. But perhaps the greatest twist of all was this: Jasmine Crockett didn't claim the last word. She gave it to the people watching. to the millions deciding what kind of nation they want to build and what kind of leaders they want to follow. And as her words echoed into history, one truth became undeniable. Dignity will always outlast mockery. Courage will always overshadow. Cruelty and justice will always outshine arrogance. And if you think this story ends here, think again. Donald Trump mocked Jasmine Crockett's career. But her clapback didn't just silence him in that moment. It shocked the nation. What we witnessed wasn't just a verbal counterpunch. It was a reminder that dignity will always outshine arrogance. This exchange proved something bigger than politics. It showed that resilience can dismantle ridicule, and that truth, spoken with courage, carries more weight than the loudest insult. Crockett didn't just defend herself. She defended every person who's ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told they weren't enough. And in doing so, she flipped the script. What started as a moment of mockery ended as a lesson in leadership. Her poise, her strength, and her unwavering command of the facts turned a stage meant to humiliate into a stage of triumph. Now, here's where you come in. If you believe voices like Jasmine Crockett's deserve to be amplified, if you believe that dignity, justice, and truth should always rise above arrogance and mockery, then don't let this story stop here. Hit that subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. Drop a comment below about the moment that struck you most. Because the more we amplify voices of courage, the stronger we all become. And this is only the beginning.